Chapter 7 The Quantum Leap 2009 2009 10 cities, 800 volunteers. MAD operations now cover Kochi, Pune, Chennai, Hyderabad, Delhi, Mumbai, Nagpur, Bangalore, and Trivandrum. The doubling of its scale of operation between 2008 and 2009 was spectacular by any standards, and Sanjana attributes the popularity to MAD's functioning. Within the non-profit sector, MAD was one of the few organizations which made such stringent demands of its volunteers. In the field of volunteerism, it was rare for an organization to expect the kind of consistency, commitment, and professionalism that MAD did. The expansion kit, developed in the initial stages of expansion phase, is a case in point. Every process of MAD was documented in excruciating detail. Selection of teaching centers, drawing up a syllabus, volunteer selection process, which includes finer points of conducting interviews, classroom etiquette, student discipline, and administrative structure of the MAD chapter. The expansion kit was to be used as a gospel for setting up a new MAD chapter and for maintaining an old one. The idea was to ensure standardization of MAD performance across chapters and across cities. MAD was already conducting teacher training programs for all the MAD teacher volunteers across the country, but planning of the syllabus was still being done by the teachers under the guidelines provided. In 2009, Make a Difference took another step towards eliminating divergence in its core processes by introducing a common syllabus supported by textbooks at all MAD centers. The syllabus of 2009 did not really measure up to MAD's expectation and was changed a year later, but the precedent had been set for a more structured learning experience and greater teacher support within MAD classrooms. After the impossibly difficult first year, my classroom duties had been getting easier with each passing year as MAD began getting it right with volunteer recruitment, training, and other teacher support systems. This was a move that really nailed it when it came to making an impact at the classroom level. It saved me and other teacher volunteers swathes of time in lesson planning. No more printouts, worksheet preparation, xeroxes, filing, wow, and a lot of other preparations before each class. Having discarded English as a single point solution, Math was now moving towards a more broad based intervention for institutionalized children. The placements program was an attempt to move not just beyond English but also beyond the classroom. It was an attempt to break the social isolation that institutionalized children faced. This program was conceptualized to improve the children's awareness of the world outside their institution and to give them dreams to aspire to fulfill. The program focused on experience based learning that would improve the children's skill sets and enable them to make informed choices about their future. This program, today reorganized as Project Discover, looks much beyond their schooling years and tries to lay the ground for a career path in order to secure their adult life. With a lot of chapters and a lot of volunteers came a lot of miscommunication and no communication. If the organization was to pull together instead of splintering apart, this was an area where MAD had to set up. The solution, when it came about, was a two-pronged strategy that sought to weave together all the MAD volunteers in all the MAD centers, in all the MAD chapters across India in pursuit of a common cause. Thus evolved the MAD app and the National MAD Conference. MAD app and MAD Conference. MAD app was the organization's online attempt to keep the communication lines open and make data accessible across the country for every MAD volunteer. This is MAD's indigenously developed web application, but when the first version came out in 2009, it was a spectacular failure. MAD app was redesigned, rethought, and relaunched in 2010. Within the span of a year, it went from being a spectacular failure to a stupendous success. Under the stewardship of MAD CTO, Chief Technical Officer, Binny VA. MAD app first version worked something like this. We would type in a chunk of stuff and go for coffee break, says Binny. When we returned 10 minutes later, words would still be appearing magically on the screen. When it came to slowness, the first version could put a tortoise to shame. It took forever to upload a single page. It was more than useless as a data storage tool. MAD app version 1 was not an in-house job. At the time that this idea came out in MAD, I had just joined and was unaware that this project was underway. MAD, in turn, was unaware of my interest in computers and software. But by the time version 1 design was completed, MAD and I knew more about each other. So, when the product flopped, I was asked to rework it, and I did. I have no idea about the issues with version 1. I never investigated. I just moved the platform from ASP.NET to LAMP PHP and recreated the whole system starting from scratch. For MAD app, we have used only open source software. Its code is available online and is used by several non-profits. I have no idea who and how many. I only know about it when they contact me to clarify doubts about the code. MAD conference was the offline strategy to bring together MAD volunteers from across the country to decide on a vision to take MAD forward. The idea was to build bridges and open up communication lines across cities. And so it was that the first ever conference in MAD history happened in 2009 in Kochi with attendees from Kochi, Chennai, Pune, Delhi, Hyderabad and Mangalore. My most vivid memory of the conference was being staggered at the price of the Kochi-Delhi flight ticket, says Jitin. But apart from that shocker, it went remarkably well. We had great discussions and we co-created a common vision for MAD. The personal rapport we built up really helped knit the organization together. It was almost worth the price of the tickets. Actually, what Jitin remembers is less than true. The conference was such a smash hit that it became an annual feature at MAD, with its scope and concept expanding and changing over time. Beginnings of the national team. With MAD being active in 10 cities, there was the realization that all MAD cities were working in isolation, even though all faced similar challenges on the ground. In effect, reinventing the wheel with every new city, every new chapter. Not a very smart idea for an organization which was eternally facing a resource crunch. In addition, the individualized operation at every teaching center resulted in a wide fluctuation in the quality of operation and program delivery on the ground, which resulted in children not getting the best MAD could offer. The obvious solution was to build the organization up in 2 layers. A city core team for each city and a layer on top of all the cities, a national team. While the city core team would lead the citywide operations, the national team would be able to provide a strong mentoring support system to city core teams. This would ensure efficient and consistent operational efficiency of all the communities. Another reason for building a national team was to have a common program creation team that could come up with customized high-impact program content to significantly improve the quality of impact on the ground. So, in 2009, Jitin took charge as the national president of MAD. But more was needed. Over the next 3 years, MAD was able to obtain both the HR bandwidth and the funding bandwidth to be able to attract the talent needed to build up the national team. This was a new beginning in MAD as the organization moved on from being a community of volunteers delivering children-centric programs to an organization of specialists enabling communities to deliver high-impact child-centric programs. There were now national mentors for each city and a program development team for each program MAD delivered. With the organizational structure in place, by 2014, MAD was impacting over 5,000 institutionalized children nationwide. Clash of the Generations. That year, MAD won 2 more awards. Nobel Laureate of Karamveer Puraskar and Indian Shines. So far, I had contributed very little to MAD other than my time as a teacher volunteer at Sneha Children's Home. But that year, I wrote the following article for a national newspaper in support of MAD when it was in the running for one of the awards. The article was rejected, but the article appeared on the MAD blog to a huge outpouring of heartfelt gratitude at the stamp of approval from the oldest volunteer. Vote for Youngstown. Say Youngstown and images of brash youth cross the mind. Savvy actors, aggressive roadies, uninhibited celebrities, VJs, DJs, RJs, and any other type of jockeys who might have sprung up since yesterday. Say Youngstown and you have the 40 plus age group roll their eyes in despair at a generation which is prepared to accept public humiliation and violence from sadistic anchors for a fleeting 15 minutes of fame. Say Youngstown and 50 plus age group clutch at their prayer beads with renewed vigor, sending up a silent prayer for the day when the Youngstonians take charge of the country. Say Youngstown, and the chances are indeed remote that you will picture young college students working with deep social commitment towards improving the lives of deprived sections of the society. And yet, there are very many young Indians who are passionately and actively involved in social causes. Most of them shoulder on silently, while the shrill young publicity seekers hog the media headlines, leading many to ponder over when, if ever, this generation will be ready to lead the country forward. Perhaps this would have been my dire outlook too had I not had the chance to interact with a Kochi-based youth organization called MAD, with Make a Difference. This is an organization of young people which works with underprivileged children, trying to secure their future by providing them with quality education. As their acronym suggests, they are an exuberant and slightly irreverent bunch of youngsters who do not take themselves seriously. But the same does not apply to their cause, for which they are willing to make any number of sacrifices. Sometimes they dip into their personal offers to supplement their shoestring budget, and sometimes they forego little pleasures for the good of the organization. While the entire country was watching the 2020 cricket finals, the core group of MAD was at a shelter for street kids setting up computers. Along the way, they have had to deal with volunteer shortage due to parents who believe this will distract their wards from studies, cynical corporates who want a rupee worth of publicity for every paisa that they contribute, and sneering peers. What's your real reason for doing this? Yet they carry on gamely, unfazed by it all. They are undaunted by the magnitude of the challenge they have taken on. They believe that they can and will. They believe that they can and will. They do where others only talk. They believe where others despair. They rush in where others fear to tread. In their own words, they will not let what they cannot do interfere with what they can do. I was taken aback by the intensity of the reaction. I had no idea that despite the general air of nonchalance towards the older generation, they still valued their opinions. Oldest volunteer was typical Jithin Nirmala, still nursing a hang-up about age. But he did let it be known that the under 25 restriction was no longer in place and had in fact been withdrawn a while back. This was, of course, as much for the benefit of Sanjana, who by now was an indispensable part of the mad inner circle, but nevertheless I was thrilled and surprised that I cared at all. I had no idea that being eligible for MAD had meant that much to me. And the reason I cared was that MAD had turned into much more than a 2-hour weekend activity. It was my shield against cynicism when there was so much to despair about. It was a salve to the pitiless avalanche of corruption and pollution in daily news. No matter how bad things seemed, for a few hours every week I knew hope, faith, and love with a passion and intensity that only the very young are capable of. But mostly I saw hope, which was the bedrock of all the work at man. Hope, that nebulous creature which either resides within your soul or it doesn't. While it stays, the world is bright and beautiful. When it flees, there are shadows lurking behind all the luminous lights. Matt secured and nurtured my reservoir of hope. Whatever nasty crimes people all over the world committed on weekends, on weekdays, I was witness to the selfless efforts of the volunteers each weekend. As long as MAD existed, so did the ideas of equality and justice. As long as these ideas were kept alive, so were the possibilities. And as long as the possibility of a better world existed, I remained hopeful and alive. and got up each morning knowing that life was good. Truth to tell, the ideas expressed in article had been festering within for some time. I had heard adverse remarks about MAD on several occasions, mostly from people who were clueless about the organization, and it rankled a little more each day. Considering the amount of flack that the youth receive for being insensitive and selfish, Matt should have been topping the approval charts all over the place and being held up as youth icons. But in a conservative town like Kochi, it has constantly been subject to parental disapproval, and many times this dislike has seemed to be more of a reflex rather than an actual opinion. And that is even more intriguing. Idealistic young people out to change the world. What's not to like? Gloria probably came closest to the truth when she spoke of the fear of the unknown. Treading uncharted territory seems to make parents uncomfortable. They are uncertain where you might end up. To protect and to shield is the primary and the strongest of parental instincts. And if you take MAD out of the narrow confines of this current debate and place it within the larger context of the ongoing generational conflict, it becomes easier to understand the issue. According to the government census of 2011, India has more than 50% of its population below the age of 25 and more than 65% below the age of 35. A country does not become younger just in years. It changes socially, emotionally, and psychologically. In case of India, the demographic change has run parallel to the explosive growth of the media and the internet. And the end result has been a generation with extensive exposure to the world outside of their physical and geographical constraints. Almost overnight, everything is up for grabs. Nothing is sacrosanct or above scrutiny. The institutions that have taken the greatest beating are the big two, religion and marriage. With both being in free fall, all traditional certainties with respect to religion, sex, sexuality, gender roles, and social equations are being tossed around for scrutiny. There is nothing subtle about the questioning of authority either. An overwhelming number of viral videos in India are spoofs about the establishment, be it government, religious figures, or Indian value systems. In a debate on gay rights versus religious sentiments, a young humor columnist asked if the sentiments of magic people in the sky are more important than the basic human rights of people that actually exist. An uncomfortable question to ask in a country with innumerable gods. While the turbulence outside is unnerving, for parents there is no comfort to be found within either. It's scary for them to see their children dress the way they disapprove, talk a language they can't comprehend, and show warm kinship towards gadgets that parents find intimidating. The breach between the young adults of today and their parents is often a yawning chasm rather than just a generation gap. If movies and TV are a reflection of our attitudes, the contrast is crystal clear. Serials in local language, a staple of the older generation, are usually family dramas involving large traditional families which are deeply rooted in conservative values. These serials are a reflection of the distorted nostalgia of a baffled generation and their deep yearning for supposedly simpler times. Their offspring, meanwhile, shun the local channels like the plague and are usually to be found catching up online on foreign serials that celebrate freedom from families. These serials are equally unrealistic, most of them depicting uncomplicated lives where grave issues like death, divorce, abuse are just more fodder for laughs. But these serials appeal to a restless generation seeking more elbow room in a traditional Indian society. Mad is just one more element in the tussle between anxious India and brash youngster. Mad exemplifies the difference between the NGOs as we knew it and an NGO founded by young India. Less pious and more kick-ass. They have all the outward trappings of flippant young people who have strayed into the social sector for a lark. For starters, where all the rules of the organization are inscribed and the mafia, which believe it or not, is a PR arm of MAD. But scratch the surface and you come upon a bunch of passionate young people, restless, rebellious, pushing the boundaries, searching for answers. Despite the outer trappings, they are the youth of every place, every age. They could be the young of the previous generation and they would fit in just fine into the next one. But most people of the older generation don't see this. They recoil at the packaging and retreat into instant judgments. Hence, the unpopularity of Jidin among the college administration, junior professor dubbing MAD as a breeding ground for drug addicts, and a mother telling me about a volunteer who became gay after joining MAD. I happen to know the volunteer, and his emergence from the closet just happened to coincide with his years with MAD. Like others from his generation, he was challenging norms and establishing a new identity. But since he was cohabiting with MAD at that time, the organization was dubbed the Gay Machine. A number of MAD volunteers are college dropouts. One volunteer dropped out for a year after grade 12 to explore options and eventually ended up as a lawyer. Another quit medical school to run his own adventure tourism business. Yet another has suspended his engineering studies to join a rural bank. And the most shining example of them all, Max CTO Binny VA, technology genius and a celebrity within the IT circles in Kerala. A keen believer in open source programming and minimalistic living, Binny dropped out of college because he was being taught obsolete information from outdated textbooks. innumerable examples, but the one common thread that runs through all these stories is man, or so it seems at a glance. But dig deeper, and what is obvious is a generation of young people having the gumption to cut loose and chart their own territories. If one could look at them dispassionately, these stories speak of courage, conviction, and the confidence to take on challenges. They are hardly instances of misguided youth run amok, as I have often heard from being interpreted. As for MAD, it is an organization which has channelized this young restlessness into a movement for taking on greater social responsibility. MAD is a messenger, not the message. But in the rich, age old tradition of shooting the messenger, MAD represents all that is unnerving, incomprehensible, and intimidating about Gen Next. If I saw MAD a little differently, it was because as a volunteer, I had bypassed the outer layers and dived right to the heart of the organization. If the insider view was available to everyone, I am convinced that there would be little opposition to MAD from any direction. It was this conviction that led me to suggest to a young MAD volunteer that she familiarize her parents with the document of MAD values. She was facing considerable flack about MAD membership at home, and I thought it would help ease the situation. But she didn't think so. Not even the cheesy bits? I asked her. Humility, cause above self, we are a family. She didn't find it funny. Like many MAD volunteers, she could take any amount of personal ribbing, but was touchy about the cause. No, they have already made up their mind. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change it. She managed to hang on at MAD that year, but dropped out the following year. She was a great teacher and a dedicated volunteer, and it seemed wasteful to lose her over a trifling issue like parental disapproval. I pondered how to win the parents over. I chewed on it for a long time and finally asked Binny, how can your generation win this argument over my generation? That's an easy one, he drawled nonchalantly. By the simple experience of outlawing all of you. That about covers it, I have to admit.